This is the German cabinet room, just across the road from the Reichstag. And it's here that Germany's coalition government meets every week to hammer out compromises and take key decisions on how to run the country. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel sits right here on a chair in the middle. Now, for Mrs. Merkel, this is a very important year on the international stage, with Germany taking on the presidencies of both the EU and the G8. So, what is Germany's position on such key issues as climate change, the EU constitution and relations with Russia? Well, today, Chancellor Merkel has agreed to speak to me and some of my colleagues from across Europe on the view from Berlin. Chancellor Merkel, you have said that not having an EU constitution in place by June 2009 would be an historic mistake. But how are you going to convince the sceptics in Britain that? And how will you get the French and the Dutch to change their minds?
The task is indeed a difficult one, there is no question about it. But we need to remind ourselves what will happen if nothing happens. If we keep the status quo, the European Union cannot enlarge. That's why I will put all my efforts into securing a new treaty.
If you fail to get an EU constitution by 2009, what are the consequences for Europe?
I don't like what-if questions, but I will say this. If you take Britain, a constitutional treaty would actually address the reservations and objections that the British have about there being too much Europe. It would strengthen the role of national parliaments. With a constitutional treaty in place, this would be a Europe much closer to what citizens actually want.
From the EU constitution to climate change, Mrs. Merkel warned that Europe alone couldn't solve that problem.
85% of greenhouse gas emissions come from outside the EU, only 15% from Europe. So even if we had no emissions, it wouldn't solve the problem. Apart from the measures we take in Europe, we need international efforts to fight climate change.
As for the gas pipeline Germany is building with Russia, bypassing Poland, Chancellor Merkel promised Warsaw wouldn't lose out.
If Poland wants, we will make sure that it has access too. The new pipeline will be able to pump gas from west to east as well. So if Poland wants this, we will work to make it happen.
And this weekend, Mrs. Merkel heads to Russia for talks with President Putin, an attempt to make Europe's energy supplies from the east more secure. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Berlin.